Good evening to everyone present here tonight. My name is Brian and I will be your host for tonight. On behalf of the JPO family, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone tuning in for tonight's broadcast. We hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe indoors. A friendly reminder to maintain good hygiene at all times and maintain social distancing when heading out. As we'd like to continue improving your experience with us, please help us achieve this by completing the poll that will be published during this broadcast. To anyone who is interested in sharing tonight's broadcast, a live feed is being shared on the JPO YouTube channel. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to type them out in the Q&A section down below. For those of you watching on YouTube, please leave your questions down in the live chat. A recording of the webinar will also be uploaded onto the JPO YouTube channel. Tonight's seminar features Madam Regina Helcher Yost, with her topic being Commissioning New Musical Solos for the Piccolo. As our JPO family attendees are mostly students ranging from primary school or middle school to college, their parents and their teachers, the sharing of knowledge and advice here for all of us tonight is invaluable and greatly appreciated. The JPO is very honored to have Regina join in as our guest for tonight. I hope that you'll all join me in giving her a warm welcome. Madam Regina is a nationally renowned musician who performs both orchestral and chamber music. She is also a well-acclaimed pedagogue of both the flute and piccolo. She currently serves as the second flutist and piccoloist with the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, as well as assistant principal flutist and piccoloist of the Colorado Music Festival in Boulder, Colorado. Additionally, she also serves as an adjunct professor of flute at the Charleston Southern University, as well as the core flutist for Chamber Music Charleston. Her professional career as an orchestral musician started with her position as an associate principal flutist and piccoloist of the Honolulu Symphony in Hawaii. Since then, she has performed in various orchestras across mainland America, holding similar positions with these orchestras. These orchestras include the Knoxville Symphony Orchestra, the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and currently the Charleston Symphony Orchestra. She also spent some time with the Minnesota Orchestra, where she earned the opportunity to perform on their New York City European tour, conducting performances in Carnegie Hall and renowned halls across Europe, such as the Musikverein Hall in Vienna and the Philharmonic Hall in Berlin. She has since then, on multiple occasions, performed at international venues and festivals, such as other parts of Europe with the Atlanta Chamber Players, as well as the Pacific Music Festival in Japan. Her academic credentials include a Bachelor of Music degree in flute performance, which she received from the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. She then recently graduated with a Master's in Music Education from the University of Florida in 2020. During this time, she had also served as an associate flute instructor at the Indiana University. She was also a flutist with the National Orchestra of New York, which is a national training orchestra that has studied with renowned musicians and conductors from across the globe. So without further ado, once again, a very good evening to Regina. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Regina.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to have been asked to be a part of your program.
The honor is ours for you joining us. So to start tonight's interview, what can you tell us about the video that we had just watched?
Yes, well, the first video was an unaccompanied piccolo composition by Martin Amlin. He is a composer that lives in Boston. He's also a pianist. He's written many fine flute and piccolo works, and it was titled Ephemeroptera, and Ephemeroptera is I believe a Latin name for mayfly. So why would I have a piece named after mayflies, which are an insect? Well, that is because this piece I had commissioned to play as an encore for a concerto that I was playing with the Colorado Music Festival. And my chair sponsors of the Colorado Music Festival, Richard and Joanne Crandall, are avid fly fisher men or women. And mayflies are the insect that you put on a lure to when you're fly fishing to catch trout. So that's why this piece was called that. It was going to be a surprise, so that when I finished my concerto, I came out and played this encore and dedicated it to them. So the piece is supposed to represent kind of how a mayfly would move around and react. And I think Martin did a really good job with that. The second video was my last published commission, which was the sonata for piccolo and piano by Amanda Harburg. And Amanda Harburg lives in Montclair, New Jersey, and she has written, she wrote this wonderful piccolo piece for me. I actually heard her, I heard another piece of hers on YouTube, someone performing her Feathers and Wax, it's called, for flute and piano, and I fell in love with it. And without even knowing her, I found her email and asked her if she would be interested in writing this piccolo work. And I'm so glad that I did. The movement that you heard was the second movement, so that was the slow movement, but you can find the other, all of the movements, there are 3 on YouTube. If you just put in Amanda Harburg Sonata for Piccolo, and you'll see more than me just playing it now, because it has become a standard of our repertoire, and it is being recorded and played all over the world. So I'm very thrilled with that commission.
Well, glad to hear that those works are good, doing well. So, why do you start commissioning new musical solos for the piccolo, and what inspired you to do so?
Well, I started commissioning them around 20 years ago, and basically I moved from Hawaii back to the mainland of the United States, and I was asked to play a piccolo concerto with the next orchestra I was in, which was the Knoxville Symphony, and the conductor at the time was Maestro Kirk Trevor, and he said, "Regina, I want you to play something that is not Vivaldi." And that was kind of few and far between then to find a concerto that was not Vivaldi. So I realized that there was a lack of serious solo works for the piccolo, and so I started commissioning works, and I found other piccolo friends that were feeling the same as I was, that there was this lack of repertoire. And so we all started kind of commissioning new works. Another reason why is there's been a lot of improvements with the piccolo as an instrument continuously, like over the last 30 years even. One thing that I could show you is that, for instance, I love to play on piccolos made in Germany that are by Anton Braun. And I have 3 of his piccolos, but these are 2 of them. And to show you a difference, most piccolos only go to low D, but Anton Braun has made one now that goes to a low C. So you can actually play almost as low as the flute. Well, I mean, not really, an octave higher, but in the staff, a low C below the staff. We can always use this now on Mahler symphonies too, where there are low Cs on piccolo parts. When before we had to play them either an octave higher or leave those notes out. So that's another reason why I had started commissioning pieces, because the instruments have gotten a lot better. And a lot of the music that was written before for the piccolo was music that sounds like bird music. So that's the one thing that I ask all composers when I commission them, is I say, please don't write me any bird music. We have lots of bird music. I want there to be serious music. So yes, so then the other thing is that there's a lot of interest in new works for the piccolo, and also these new works can be used for recital repertoire, which before you could only play bird music or Vivaldi, basically. So that's really why I started to do it.
All right. So so I think like you mentioned earlier, you have been commissioning your works for at least 20 years. So yeah. So how long have you been
Yes.
commissioning your works? Yeah.
Yes, around 20 years I've been doing it, ever since I moved back to the mainland from Hawaii. And so I wanted to kind of go through the process on, at least my process on commissioning new works, and what does it mean to commission a new work? Well, basically, when you're commissioning, that means you are contracting and paying, hopefully, a composer to write you a work. So the way that I do it is, usually what happens is I'll hear a piece that has been written for the flute by a composer either I don't know, or maybe it is one that I know, and I'll fall in love with that work, and I'll think, oh my gosh, that work is so fantastic, they have to write a piece for the piccolo now. And then I contact the composer, and nowadays it's very easy to find people's information, because either they're on Facebook or Instagram, or they have a website, or there's some friend of yours that knows this person, or you know the person that was performing their flute work. And so you just find their contact information. And most of the composers that I have commissioned, I never knew before. So I'm just a new person writing to them saying, I love your flute work. Would you have interest in writing a piccolo piece? And all of them except for one said yes. One didn't like the piccolo, so we're still working on that person. I won't mention who it is because it's kind of a famous living composer now. So that's the second step. The next step is telling them what type of piece you're interested in. So the length of the piece, like how long do you want it to be? Normally I say 7 to 10 minutes long if it's a sonata, or 12 minutes long. And what instrumentation do you want? Do you want piccolo alone? Do you want piccolo and piano? Do you want? I have a piece for piccolo and bassoon. That one became very popular. I have a piece for piccolo and harpsichord. So it just depends what instrumentation you want, or piccolo and string quartet I have. So that's the next thing. And then, very important, how much is this going to cost? Because that's where I would say it's best to find composers that are up and coming, because they're less expensive. And then you need to sign it once you agree on what the price will be. You want, and all of these things, you need to sign a contract. Even if it's a friend, make up a little written contract. Why is this important? Because I had one time a composer come back and say, well, I've decided I want more money. I was like, no, because we have it in the contract. So, or also, it's also important to have things in the contract, like who's going to premiere the piece. Is it going to be you? Is it going to, are you commissioning it for a friend? Are they going to premiere the piece? And how long do they have the rights to be the first person to play it, or the recording rights on the piece? And then after you've signed the contract, I would say fundraise. So what I do, I mean, people know that I love to commission new works, and now the composers I've asked have really provided a great track record of great pieces. And so I asked people that I know who are also in the same mindset and interested in more repertoire if they would donate. And I set a price and say, if you can donate any amount, but if you donate a certain amount, then you get you can be a co-commissioner, which means I would premiere the piece, but then for like a year, the co-commissioners can also play the piece after I've premiered it. And so it's kind of a special thing. They could also record it too. So those are just some things that I do.
All right, that definitely sounds interesting. There's a lot of legal issue. There's a lot of like legal stuff that goes into it. So yeah, that's definitely interesting to learn about. So, what are some of the new solos for Piccolo that you have commissioned?
Yes, well, the
I think I
oh, you
missed.
want to go back to another question?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'll go back to another one. Sorry. So, how do you get the new solo piece recognized among flute and piccolo players?
Yes, well, reiterating what I just said about the contract, you put in who is going to premiere it, and so normally, unless I have raised money for commissions for other people to premiere at the National Flute Association convention, but generally now I just do it for myself and co-commissioners, friends who do it. So that's one thing. A great way is to have co-commissioners because they then can put it on their YouTube page. I'm sorry, their YouTube pages, their channels, I should say, their Facebook pages or Instagram pages, all of them performing the work really get the word out. And there are a lot of Facebook pages you can put it on. Different countries have different flute pages. There's an international flute Facebook page. There are Piccolo ones. And then, of course, when people hear it, they start sharing it with their friends, and it just keeps going. So social media is a great way to get it out there. Also, word of mouth, of course, helps a lot. And then I cover and performing the piece a lot. So say you've commissioned the piece and you've premiered it, then start premiering it at all, or start playing it at all of your recitals and different conventions and different locations, different flute festivals.
All right. So coming back to the question just now. So, what are some of the new solos for piccolo that you have commissioned?
Yes. Well, you heard two of them. And there are a lot more than I have listed on the next PowerPoint slide. But basically, the one that has become the most famous so far, besides the Amanda Harburg, which is kind of hot off the press in the last couple of years, is the Sonata for Piccolo and Piano by Mike Mower. That one took off. It has been required competition material for piccolo competitions, national ones. It has been recorded by many great piccolo artists around the world. I love hearing everyone playing this piece. And so that is a really good one. And the reason why I started commissioning that one was because I heard someone perform Mike Mower's Sonata Latina, which is very famous flute work. And once I heard that, I was like, I must find this man. He must write a piccolo piece. And he actually wrote me a letter, or an email not that long ago, because that one's been out for, I don't know, over 10 years, I think now. And he wrote me an email saying, I'm so glad you asked me to play this piece, write this piece, because everyone's playing it. The other one that has an interesting background is the Sonatine by Jindrik Feld. Jindrik Feld wrote a fantastic flute sonata. I just love that piece. And actually, how I ended, and I had always known that piece, but I was reading Flute Talk magazine. I shouldn't say this, but it was during an orchestra rehearsal when I wasn't playing. And I had it on my stand because there wasn't a lot for me to play in that orchestra rehearsal. So I thought, well, I want to make use of the time. And there was an article about Jindrik Feld saying that he had just retired from his post in Prague as a professor. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's still alive? he used to write a Piccolo piece. So he didn't have internet, and he didn't do email. It was just not his thing. And so a friend of mine knew another friend of mine that had his address, physical address. And I wrote him a letter. And so we wrote letters back and forth, and I still kept them, which I think is very special. He wrote very eloquently in English. It was beautiful. And I asked him to write this piece, and he said yes. And I asked him for I believe it was a 7-minute work, and he wrote an 11-minute work. And he said, I hope you don't mind, but I just kept writing. And so it's wonderful. And actually, it took Ledoux it took them over a year to publish it. Maybe they were backed up on their publishing, because that was his publishing company in France, the French company. And lo and behold, at a flute convention, after I had premiered it, and then the next year came up, I saw the Ledoux booth at the National Flute Association convention. I went up to them and I said, is this piece published? And they said yes. And actually, Yindrik died last week, and it's the last piece that we've published of his. And oh my gosh, so it was really a heart-wrenching moment to know that this was the very last piece they'd published of his. And it's really a wonderful piece. Another piece that I commissioned that's got an interesting, is actually probably my very first commission, was Portraits by Robert Cronin. And I had just moved from Hawaii. I didn't have hardly any money to commission anything. So Robert Cronin was my principal flutist in the Knoxville Symphony at the time. Now he's in the Atlanta Symphony, and he's a wonderful composer. And I said, I'd love to commission you, but I don't have any money. And he said, well, another friend of mine in the Kansas City Symphony wants to commission me too, and she doesn't have enough money, so why don't you go in on it together? So we did. We each jointly commissioned him, and he wrote this piece called Portraits, and it's 2 movements. And the first movement is a portrait of her, and the second movement is my portrait. And my portrait is in the second movement is very, very jazzy, and it has and it's fast, and it has a real groove to it. I actually really like jazz music, so he knew that. And also, it has almost nowhere to breathe. And I asked him, why did you write me a piece with hardly anywhere to breathe, even though I love this piece? And he said, this is because the way you talk, you hardly ever take any breaths. So as you can see, it's true. So these are some of the pieces that I have commissioned, and there are many more, but I couldn't write them all up here. I have 2 new commissions coming out. One of them was supposed to be premiered in August, the Flute Convention, but of course, because of COVID, the Flute Convention got canceled in person. And so she's still writing it, and this piece is called Awakenings, and it's by Jean On. And she is writing, it's for piccolo and piano, and it's going to be in several different movements of different types of awakenings. So it's going to be really cool. I have a few snippets of it that she has sent me, and it's really wonderful. I think it's going to become a standard in our repertoire. Another piece is a piccolo trio that is going to be premiered by me, Sarah Jackson from the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and Nicole Esposito from the University of Iowa. And that commission is by Edward Hart, and he is a local Charleston composer. He teaches at, he's a professor at the College of Charleston here.
All right. So do you have any new, so these are the new Piccolo solo commissions that are coming out soon, right? Or are these
These are the ones, yes.
Next year? Yeah. All right. That's interesting.
So far.
Yeah.
I have an idea for some more that I want. Now that we're in COVID, I realize there are hardly any unaccompanied piccolo solos. And we need some more of those. So I I've got some thoughts in my mind about who I'd like to ask in the future, but I won't say yet because I don't know if they're going to say yes yet.
Fair enough. So, before we move on to the next question, I'd just like to remind our viewers that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please leave them in the Q&A section, or you could leave them in the live chat in YouTube. So in your opinion, what have the challenges for a musician commissioning new pieces during this pandemic been? So how about as a
Yeah,
musician or music educator in general? Sorry if I cut you off there.
no, that's fine. Yes, I think it's kind of twofold. There are challenges because because of the social distancing and the aerosol problem with flutes and piccolos that we can't really give live recitals. You kind of can, but it's kind of a risk. And so the best way really to get out a new piece would be to put it on social media. And that actually everyone's looking at social media now. So that actually is a plus side because everything we're doing pretty much is through social media. The other downside is raising money because unfortunately COVID has struck pretty much globally somewhat of an economic crisis, and people don't really have extra money to give away. So I would say it's still possible to commission people now. Especially if they're up and coming, if they're willing to do it for a lot less money, or maybe even free, just to get their name out. If you have friends that are students you think, oh, they're just a wonderful composer. Now might be the time to help them and help the repertoire get new pieces out.
All right. Thanks for sharing that with us. So moving on to the next question, like I think we see it on the slide over here. What advice do you have for anyone who would like to commission new solo pieces for their instrument?
Yes, well, I would say don't be afraid to do it. The very first time I did it, I was a little nervous about it, and also sometimes there are occasionally you'll get a piece where you're like, that's not really what I wanted, or it's not exactly how I like it, but someone will. And because everyone has different tastes. So I would say the advice I would give would be to go for it, to listen to a lot of different, think about the pieces that really touch you that are already out there, and for your instrument. So we're talking about piccolo commissioning, but this applies to any instrument with commissioning. And see if sometimes there'll be someone who you're hearing a beautiful viola solo, and but you don't know how they would write for the flute or the piccolo. So just contact them and see if they have any experience with that, or look online on their website and see what other instruments they've written for. And then proceed and ask them all the questions that I had said with my process. How much is it going to cost? That's a big one. Are they interested is the first one, first question. And you should also, I forgot to say, put it, once you have commissioned a composer, put a time limit, exact time on when this piece is to be finished. And give there a little leeway. So say you're going to premiere this piece in August, tell them you want it done in May or before, because things happen in life, and sometimes, or maybe they're having a little inspiration problem at the moment, or things are going on and they haven't had time to write. Or they could be a last minute writer. And in my experience, I don't like to really premiere something that's hot off the press, like they just finished it like an hour ago. Like I want to practice it and make it wonderful so that people will love their piece. So that's another tip, is to make sure that, and check in with the composer every now and then. So say you've given them a year to write this piece, every now and then check in and say, hey, how's it going? Like, because there are some composers that will work on it throughout a year, and some composers which will pull it off 2 weeks before they're before the deadline. And it doesn't mean that they're going to write a bad piece, just people work differently.
And that's definitely understandable. That definitely applies to everything, actually. So before we move on to our Q&A section, the JPO does have a question for you. So with your experience in working with the within the music industry, what are your thoughts on the JPO and its activities?
Well, as the maestro explained to me, you have a wonderful series going on here with, I don't even know how many Zooms you've had so far. He told me, and now I've forgotten, there were so many. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for professionals and students to get educated in different areas of music than we normally would have thought about, and to feel connected. I must say myself, I have watched a lot of Zoom videos this summer, a lot of live ones or recorded ones about all sorts of topics. Of course, some of them were how to deal with the aerosols with the flu during COVID. Other ones have been like, for instance, James Galway always has a big festival in Switzerland, and I can never attend it because I'm always playing in the Colorado Music Festival, which I love, in the summer. And but this year I could attend it because they did it all on Zoom, and then they left it on for like another 2 weeks afterwards so that you could go back if you missed any of it. It was amazing. They had international flute and piccolo artists from all over the world on it, teaching master classes, giving recitals, talking, about their fields like orchestra or the different flute makers. It was amazing. So I think that the fact that your orchestra is doing this is remarkable. It's going above and beyond, and I applaud you.
Thank you. So with that, I think we'll move on to our Q&A section. So yep, as we can see over here, we received some questions in the chat. So we have one person saying hi. So when you say commissioning a new musical composition, may I know normally the copyrights belong to the person who commissioned the piece, or does it belong to the composer? If it's it's quite a long question there. If the copyright is not with the composer, could one actually publish and sell it, or do they both have to share a percentage of the profit earned?
The copyright does belong to the composer, so that is, I think, that's one thing people have asked me, like, well, if you are not getting paid, like I'm not getting paid anything to commission a work, and you're raising all this money to give to a composer, and then they have the rights for the piece, like, what do you get out of it? But to me, I get out of it the fact that I've now been a part of creating, well, not doing the creation itself, but having someone else create more repertoire for the instrument. And when the people are recording and playing it all over the world, it's just like, I don't know, it just really inspires me to do it more. And so yes, the copyright does belong to the composer, and of course, anyone can play the piece, but I think if they record it, they should contact the composer and, get approval. I would say I can't imagine they're not going to approve a person to record their piece on a CD or or for iTunes or whatever, because they want to get it out there. That's why they've written it. So I hope that I have, let's see. But yeah, I don't get any profit. It's all for the composer.
All right. So thank you for that. So moving on. So hi Regina. So this is another person. So hi Regina. When you commission someone to write a piece, do you always get the piece published?
Yes. I would say yes. Usually a composer either has is associated with a publisher, such as in the case of Jendrik Feld, it was Ledoux, or in the case of Amanda Harburg, it was Theodore Presser. They already have established a connection with these publishing companies, or they publish themselves. They self-publish. I don't exactly understand how that works because I don't write the music, but it is important to have it published, especially if you're going to play it at the National Flute Association convention, because they want a published piece that someone is going to be able to purchase. And it just kind of helps keep everyone employed.
All right. So, so just moving on. So we have another question from someone. So this person is saying, whom would you say composed the most for Piccolo? Or are there any other composers who specialize in composing specifically for the Piccolo?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, I'd love to say Vivaldi, but actually, he really wrote those for the recorder. So, and we play them on the piccolo, unless you're Michala Petri, and she plays them on the recorder phenomenally. But yeah, I don't think I would say there's anyone in specific that that specifically is doing mainly composing for the piccolo. It seems like they're usually composing for the flute, and then sometimes they will be asked to write a piccolo piece, such as Mike Mower, or there's a lot of people like that, but not people that are just like really putting out a lot of piccolo works on their own.
All right. So moving on to our next the question from our next viewer. So are you required to work very closely with the composer when you commission a composer to write a piece? Yeah, that's something I was thinking about as well.
Well, that is a good question. Some composers want a lot of interaction. I would say my one of my recent my future, I guess you'd say, commission with this Ginon, she likes a lot of interaction. She sends me little snippets and then says, can you play this on the piccolo? And how do you feel about how I've written this? You know, does it fit well on the piccolo? Or is there a way, like she'll want to, she's a little bit more of a modern composer than I normally commission. But so she'll have a few different sounds she wants to put in it, and she'll say, does this work on the piccolo? Like, how would it sound? Could you play it on the piccolo, or do you not like it? You know, and so we've had a lot of interaction, which has been great, really fantastic. Unfortunately, since it was supposed to be done and premiered last August, of course, I've given her more time now. We're continuing the interaction. Also with Amanda Harburg, there was great interaction where this is going to sound a little strange, but I like to get my piccolos that are made by Anton Braun in Germany. I actually, like, every 5 years, get on an airplane and go to Germany with my piccolos and have him restore them so that they're in phenomenal condition, because he makes his own pads, and I think he has his own maybe oil that he uses. And so I just feel like I like it from the master. And so on my last trip there a couple of years ago, since she lived in New Jersey and I was flying through Newark, I think, I went early, and and she had pretty much written the piece, but she was tweaking it. So, and since she's a pianist, she played it with me, and so she actually ended up, I played it for her, with her, and we rehearsed. And then I flew to Germany, and then I came back, and she had actually, tweaked actually how it visually looked. Like the sound would be the same, but the way I've barred it here makes it difficult to read. So I'm going to rebar this, and it was true. It was very helpful. And so yes, someone like Mike Mower, it's not anything against him. He's been a fantastic musician. I didn't have a lot of interaction. I basically said, I want something jazzy. I love the Sonata Latino for flute. Go for it. So he wrote it, and then I received it, and I loved it. So that was all him, no me at all.
It was a very hands-off commission with that.
Yes, very hands off. And then, of course, with Jindrik Feld, it was also because he didn't do internet, and it takes a long time to get a letter to Prague and back. That was very hands off too. I just told him I loved his flute sonata, and please develop the range. The piccolo can play very high, but it can play very beautifully low now because of these new the instruments becoming so much better. And so same thing with him. He wrote it and then sent it to me. And actually, this was incredible because most composers, they put it in maybe Finale, Sibelius. They can hear, a MIDI of it, or sometimes they'll send me a MIDI of it, but not Jindrik, because he didn't like the computer. He hand wrote the whole thing and heard it in his head, and then sent that, to Ledoux, who then made it so that it was, readable. But I have the handwritten copy, so I feel like that's very special.
All right. Well, moving on to our next question. So it's from another viewer. So this person is obviously a flutist. Hi, I'm a flutist and just had a chance to try the piccolo not too long ago. What would you suggest I do or prepare if I want to specialize in the piccolo?
Well, my biggest thing is I think that all piccolo players should not just play the piccolo, that they should definitely be flutists equally. So so I would say always start your practice session with the flute, then practice the piccolo. A lot of orchestra players that do not like to play the piccolo, they're not the piccolo player, obviously. They always say, "Oh, I don't like the piccolo. It's so hard to play in tune, and I just don't sound good on it." But it's because they never practice it. And like, if you want to be good at something, you have to practice it. So I would say start by making sure you have a good piccolo. There are a lot of differences in quality of piccolo, unfortunately, compared to flute. There's a lot of flutes that you can get a pretty good sound out of, even if it's not a really good one. But on the piccolo, if you get one that's not very good, it's going to sound really bad. So try to get a good piccolo. There are good piccolos now that are not that expensive, so that's good. The price has really come down. And then also practice doing the same thing, warm-ups you would do on the flute. Do long tones so that you can get used to the piccolo. Try to be as relaxed as possible. It does require a smaller aperture, but you should try to play very relaxed, have great posture. Make sure you're not using too much tension. And the biggest thing is the high notes. Every time I end up going to a festival somewhere and they have me give a master class of the piccolo, they always say, "I can't get the high notes out." This is the deal. When you're playing the piccolo, it has a very small aperture hole, right? So if you want to play, I'm not going to play high note because it might blow up Zoom. No. but if you want to play a really high note on the piccolo, you need there to be a lot more hole showing. So if you're not getting your very stratosphere high notes out, roll out. Make sure you're not covering as much of the hole. That's the easiest way to get the high notes out. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, I'm very sure a lot of like aspiring piccolo players will definitely find that very helpful there. So thanks for that, Regina. So moving on. So what's the biggest difference in between the flute and the piccolo? Because tonight is the first time for me to see what piccolo really is.
Uh-huh. Well, the biggest difference is that it's small. And it plays very, very high. So a few things like if you're starting to play, even when you continue to play, is you want to make sure that you protect your hearing. Sometimes one of the problems with the piccolo is it plays very damaging notes for hearing, for yourself, for others in an orchestra. It's not a friendly it's not a friendly ear experience for the health of your ears. I think it's pleasant to listen to, and I love playing the piccolo, but so how are you going to protect your ears? You can get like professional earplugs made. Those are expensive. There's also an array of different earplugs out that are a lot less expensive now that you can find on the internet. But if you don't even want to do that, because sometimes when you are putting earplugs in, you can no longer hear yourself clearly. And because it's like the voice, like the flute, we sound much different to ourselves in our head when we're speaking than we do to other people. If you've ever recorded yourself talking and listened back, it's similar on the piccolo. What we're hearing is, only this distance, right? So if I put in earplugs, I'm really altering that sound, but I want to protect my hearing. So one of the cheapest and easiest ways is to get a cotton ball and like split it in half, and don't wedge it in your ear, but just slightly put it in your ear or one ear. And that will help so that you can hear yourself playing, but you're also protecting your hearing. So the other differences are on the flute. I should have brought my flute up here. Obviously, the piccolo is much smaller. And so everything you do on the piccolo, it's like taking how you play on the flute and putting a big magnifying glass on it. So if you're a little bit out of tune on the flute on certain notes, you're going to be a lot out of tune on the piccolo on those notes. So what I do on the piccolo is I always practice with the tuner on my stand. I either just have it on so that it will show what my pitch is, or I might put it on a sound. Like if I'm playing in D major, I might make it so that it sounds like a D, even though it's not a pretty sound on a tuner, but so that I have something to adjust my pitch to, because it's a lot harder to play in tune on the piccolo. It's also a lot harder to play soft in the high register in the piccolo. So that comes with practice and learning to relax. And the airstream is quite fast on the piccolo. So you have to learn how to control that airstream without playing loud all the time.
All right, that was definitely very eye-opening. Didn't realize there were that many differences between the piccolo and the flute there. All right, so does the piccolo have a very different key system like the oboe, or is it very similar to a flute's key system there?
Yeah, I don't play the oboe, so I don't know what the oboe key system is. You'd have to ask a person who plays both the oboe and the flute. But it has generally the same key system as the flute. You could play all of the same notes on the piccolo with flute fingerings. The difference is because the piccolo is tricky to play in tune, and there are books out there. One of them is a piccolo fingering book by Stephen Tanzer. It may be out of print again. It keeps like getting bought out, and then they run out of them, and then they print more. So I'm not sure where it is right now on that, but that is a fantastic piccolo fingering book. And why would I need different fingerings for the piccolo? Because these different fingerings will alter the intonation. So for instance, on a flute, I would play a D like this, but on a piccolo, that a D above the staff. But on the piccolo, that's a flat note. If you play it like this, you can get it out and you could lip it up, but you could also play a fingering like this, and then it's automatically sharper. And then so there's a lot of like nuanced fingerings like that, and piccolo players are always like either inventing new fingerings that they've figured out on their own, or looking in these books, or that book, I should say. There's not a lot of piccolo fingering books out there, or trading secrets of piccolo. They're not really secrets, but trading their fingerings with other piccolo friends and writing them down. And so yes, it has the same key system as the flute. And I guess the flute has a very similar system as a saxophone, except for the octave key. We don't have an octave key.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Regina. I think we've just about run out of time for tonight. So yeah, thank you so much for all the responses. Sorry, everyone. Thank you. Sorry, everyone, but once again, we are coming to the end of tonight's broadcast. We would like to remind everyone that our JPO family program will be broadcasted twice a week, so every Wednesday and every Sunday, until further notice. Join us next time with our next guest, who will be revealed at a later date. More details on this can be found on our JPO Facebook page. A video recording of tonight's broadcast will also be available on the JPO YouTube channel, along with past webinars and the soon-to-be broadcasted interviews. So feel free to share the Zoom webinar registration link, or the JPO Facebook page, or even the JPO YouTube channel with your friends and family. For our YouTube audience, if you are enjoying our program, please show your support to us by pressing the like and subscribe button down below. So once again, you guys have been an amazing audience. And so we from the JPO family wishes that everyone stays safe and healthy as we face this crisis together. So I will now be leading the prayer to end tonight's program. So please feel free to pray in whatever faith that you believe in regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. We pray that everyone in the world continues to stay safe and strong in surviving through these difficult times, and that a solution to the virus will soon be found. We pray for everyone's well-being as we continue to hope that the spread of the virus will soon be stopped. We pray for the safety and well-being for everyone working as we approach the end of August. We pray for the continued safety and morale of the frontliners who are risking their lives so that they may continue to provide for those in need. So I think, that about ends tonight's program. So thank you once again. Thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
Thank you. So good night and see you all next time. See you.
Bye.